himself on the head of the bed.
Okay, thank you, Micah. Genesis chapter 47 is our chapter for tonight. And there are three things I'd like to talk about tonight or just mention. The first one is something that we've already seen before, that the family of Israel is provided in the land of Egypt. So we see that in verses 1 through 12. They finally come and they meet Pharaoh and they have their place, their land, and they are multiplied there in the land. And it's kind of interesting that, well, we already seen this before, but Joseph is the reason that the children of Israel are prospering and being blessed in the land of Egypt. In Exodus, this is Exodus chapter 1 verse 7 says, "But the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty." So this is what's going to take place as they come into this land here. "And the land was filled with them." So there is multiplication. God is using Egypt in order to multiply his people. In Acts chapter 7 verse 17 and 18 says, "When the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt till another king arose who did not know Joseph." So they grow and they multiply until someone who doesn't know Joseph comes to the throne, which tells us that while the pharaohs knew Joseph, they multiplied there. And so it's because of Joseph that they are multiplying in Egypt, and that Pharaoh is favorable to them. Acts chapter 13 verse 17, "The God of this people Israel chose our fathers and exalted the people when they dwelt as strangers in the land of Egypt with an uplifted arm, and he brought them out of it." He exalted the people. So the people of Israel, they find favor in the sight of the Egyptians. There's a good relationship and there's a good view of the people of Israel while they are multiplying there. One other word just to kind of take note of in Acts chapter 13, 17 is the word strangers. They dwelt as strangers in the land of Egypt. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And so we see Joseph being the reason for the prosperity. This is nothing new that we've seen. We haven't already seen in the life of Joseph. He went to Potiphar's house and he was blessed there. He went to the jail and he was blessed there. He went into Pharaoh's service and he's blessed there. And the people come and they're blessed there because of him. So this is the blessing of God around the life of Joseph. Now, remember Egypt, we all know this, Egypt is not the final place. That's not where they're supposed to be. That's kind of a temporary place. It is the land of promise that's really important. And Jacob promises here at the end, the last couple of verses here, it says, he says, "When I pass away, make sure that you take me and bury me in my burial place back in the promised land." So that too is a pointer to the fact that Egypt is just a place of sojourning, but it is not the final resting place, not the final place of rest. It is not the promised land. And this actually is a reflection or a statement of Jacob's faith in God. He still believes that God has promised him, and he still understands that the promised land is the promised land for him. And when he passes away, he wants to be carried back to that land. So this brings us to this idea of sojourning. We see when Jacob is brought into Pharaoh's presence, this is how he describes himself. So if you look at verse 9, it says, "Jacob said to Pharaoh, 'The days of the years of my pilgrimage,'" and he uses this word to describe his life. The years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. Now this word pilgrimage, it's only translated pilgrimage. This is the first time it's translated as pilgrimage here. But it has been translated in other places before this as strangers. So they will use this word to describe themselves as strangers in the land. Or it is said of them, they are strangers in this land. This is even the land of Canaan. They're strangers in the land of Canaan. And so they are, this is the view of the people of God because they have not come into their rest. They are strangers in the land. They are pilgrims. Their life is a pilgrimage going from one place to the other. And even going into Egypt is just another example of Jacob's pilgrimage because he hasn't found his place of rest. This is just another stopping point in the life of Jacob. And this I think, is probably the strongest reflection of the Christian life that we can kind of connect with, is this idea of being a pilgrim or a stranger here in this world. As we know, the New Testament says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, it says, "Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation." And so, just like Jacob and Israel and the people of God there, they didn't enter into their rest. So here we are pilgrims and strangers in this land, and we have not entered into our rest. And as a result, we are given instructions on how to live. We are to live rejecting the fleshly lusts, and we are to live in a certain way with those that are outside. So we have, the contention with ourselves, the contention or, the presence with the Gentiles or the unbelievers that are all around us. And so we're to live or conduct ourselves here as pilgrims in a certain way. And again, at the end of the pilgrimage, for Jacob, when he dies, his body is to be carried back into the promised land. Just as when we pass on, will finally enter into our rest, as the book of Hebrews says. So there's an interesting parallel there, and Jacob's reflection of his life. I mean, even if we think about Jacob's life, it's not, he didn't spend a whole lot of time in the promised land. I mean, there's a good chunk in the middle there, but he, was out in the north of there, and, with Laban and all of that, and, now he's going to be in Egypt for the last 17 years of his life. And so there's a good amount of journeying or, pilgrimaging in Jacob's life. I like to make up words every once in a while. The other thing that we see here is the verses concerning the famine. And this is also interesting, coming back to Joseph. So the blessing and the prosperity is because of Joseph, and we know that Pharaoh put him in charge because he had an eye to the prosperity. I mean, he knew what to do with what was coming. God had revealed the dream to him and the interpretation of the dream. He had the wisdom to know what to do. Pharaoh puts him in charge, and everything is going along, just as planned and as scheduled, and just as Joseph has seen. And so the whole prosperity revolves around Joseph. And we really see the extent of this in this passage. So, to Pharaoh goes everything, the whole entire wealth of the nation of Egypt and the nations that are around. Everything goes to Pharaoh into his possession. All of their money, because they run out of money first. We don't have any more money to buy food. What can we do? Well, there's your livestock. So all the livestock goes to Pharaoh. Well, we don't have any money. We don't have any livestock. Now what do we do? Well, then all the land goes to Pharaoh. So all of their money, all of their livestock, all of their land has gone to Pharaoh. And then what's next? Well, here's the seed to plant, and we get 20% of it. And so all of those taxes go to it. So that's a pretty steep tax rate right there, or steeper than we might be used to paying here even. But that was it. They didn't have any food. The famine was still going strong, and through this famine, all of the wealth of the nations, I get the impression that it's particularly Egypt. I'm not exactly sure, the reflection of, the people in the land of Canaan and so on, but it doesn't say that specifically. But we can just, at least the people of Egypt are impacted by this. So all of the land of the nation of Egypt comes to Pharaoh because of Joseph. And so everything just revolves around Joseph, except for the priests. Their land did not go to Pharaoh. They had their land allotted to them, which is a little bit opposite of what happens in the land of Israel, because the priests aren't given land in the land of Israel, so it's a little bit different there. And like the Israelites, the priests are taken care of. These are the priests of Egypt. So the exemptions, or the exceptions, I should say, to this money and livestock and land and the produce going to Egypt, The exception to that are the priests of Egypt and the people of Israel, strangely enough. The people of Israel are taken care of. And it seems like it's not at their expense, and it is because of Joseph. And so they're provided for in this. And I think what we see in this, we just get a little bit of a glimpse of the plundering of the world, I guess you might say, by those who belong to God. And I think that there's a certain sense in which we, as the people of God, now I know, the health, wealth, and prosperity message is about receiving the wealth of the world. The wealth of the world comes to us. But I think what we should not focus on that necessarily as much as here we are in a strange place. We're pilgrims and strangers. We have the opportunity to be wealthy spiritually, if you will. It doesn't matter that we're in a foreign place, and it doesn't matter that we're not in the presence of God, and it doesn't matter that all of the world around us is sinful. We still have, despite all of these things, we still have the opportunity to be wealthy, if you will, spiritually speaking. You would normally think that spiritual growth and benefit can only take place, and I think we as Christians think this, that spiritual prosperity and benefit and blessing can only take place if we kind of, separate ourselves. We're supposed to separate ourselves from the world, but if we're like free from all of the entanglements of the world. When in reality, it is all of those entanglements and the attacks that come against us in which God works and our faith can be strengthened. It is when we suffer in this world, whether we're talking about health or the other persecutions that might come against us, that the faith, that the work of God can move in our life, and we can be blessed and we can be strengthened in our faith. And so it's kind of contrary to reason, and yet this is what God uses. He takes the people to a foreign land to bless them and multiply them. And here we are in a foreign place, and we can find ourselves blessed and prosperous, spiritually speaking, here in this world. All right, thoughts or questions or comments? Okay. Let's go ahead and take some prayer requests and praises. And if you want to share some of the things God has been doing in your